Guest today is Faith Geiger. She describes herself as a human potentialist, integral coach, and future workplace therapist. Recently, she founded Tulla. That's Tulla. Tulla is a workplace advising, coaching, and training company. But Tulla is very different from other workplace culture or employee experience companies you may have come across in the past. For one, the word love shows up a lot on their website. It's even in their URL, tulla.love. So you can find Tulla on the web at www.tulla.love. I love the sound of that. Tulla is an integrative advising, coaching, and training company that exists to liberate and empower the human spirit, starting in the workplace. Grounded in science and guided by love, our methodology helps shape workplace cultures and the employee experience in a way that all stakeholders flourish in life and business. We work alongside conscious leaders who deliberately use their company as a force for good in the world and see themselves as stewards of human development and love. Taking a human-centered approach, we support leaders at all levels in guiding their team members to become the highest and best version of themselves, creating a positive ripple effect on business outcomes and society. Tulla is led by Faith Geiger, a passionate human potentialist. Faith works and lives at the intersection of social work and business and spends her energy, time, and talents on improving the lives of others by creating the conditions inside of the workplace for people and organizations to flourish mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and financially. So pretty interesting stuff. And to be fair, in some ways, parts of this sound a lot like other companies who take a well-being focused approach to workplace culture and employee experience. But what if I told you that Tulla may soon be offering MDMA-assisted therapies as part of their services? Just to be clear, Faith is an advocate for psychedelic-assisted therapy and believes it can be a helpful tool for unlocking human potential, creating a better employee experience, and a more successful business. Do you want to hear more about that? I certainly do. Hey, Faith.
Hi. Okay, so hearing that from just the introduction and then reading, that's the first time I've ever experienced that. So thank you. That was kind of a treat to hear it being reflected back.
I really enjoyed it. I think it's so interesting, and it's worth focusing on the things that are really, really different because I just love that your URL has .love in it. And it comes across in, just so many, parts of the content that you've got on the site. And I know a lot of times, like, we write things trying to express or describe what we feel. And sometimes that stuff, kind of doesn't exactly capture it. But I feel like this does a really good job of capturing what you've, described to me in the past. So I loved it. I enjoyed reading it. And
gosh, thank you. Seriously.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being here today.
Yeah. Of course. I'm so delighted, honored.
And I am as well. And one of the reasons that we're having this conversation is, because of the MDMA-assisted therapy. And one of the things that I want to make really clear is that this is not necessarily a conversation about MDMA-assisted therapy. That is one thing that is part of this story of unlocking human potential. And also within the kind of the unique context of the times that we're living in now and what we've all been through together with the pandemic and, all of those things, I think people are going to be really, really interested in the MDMA part. And so am I. And so I definitely want to talk about it.
So am I. So am I.
But I want to, but I want to make sure that for you it fits in the right, kind of context. So I've got a couple of questions here. And I'd like to start with, your career journey. So like many people, you've had an interesting career journey, but your career journey is now taking you to places that most of us have never contemplated going. The headline, of course, is that you have a unique perspective on the role of psychedelic-assisted therapy in cultivating potential and elevating humanity. And that's starting in the workplace. And I want to emphasize that, in the workplace. How did your career journey start? Where has it gone? And how did you end up here?
Oh, gosh. Great question. And it actually brings up an interesting point that I'm a practice, not a point, a practice that I've started, which is to to create a timeline of life events, because we often forget about our journeys, or, just the milestones. So I was reflecting on this recently, just my journey and how I got to where I am today, how I arrived to where I am today. So without going into detail about every single job, obviously, or position, I will say that my work life started at a very early age. I was working basically when I was like 15, worked at a retirement home. Then I went into retail and leadership development and retail, into the retail industry for about 12 years. And one of my stops before I decided, or my last stop in retail before I decided I want to go back to school, I want to finish my degree path, and I want to make sure I use my life as a force for good, my last stop was at Lululemon Athletica. And while many jobs or careers or companies that I worked for had such an impact on me, Lululemon probably had one of the greatest breakthroughs. So I managed a Lululemon Athletica. They focused a lot on personal and professional development. I was, of course, very interested in it. I had major breakthroughs in my life. Then I decided to get out of retail, and I met Randy Eisenman, who's the founder of Satori Capital. And the point of being at Satori was to be his executive and personal assistant, which I had never done before, but I wanted to finish my degree. And so I thought, well, I can either find a part-time job so I can focus on school, or, here's this really amazing opportunity with an amazing human and great company. I will go be an executive assistant. And it ended up turning into so much more than an executive assistant and personal assistant. So he has a multi-strategy investment firm co-founded with his partner, Sonny Vanderbeck, and they take their approach to business is through the lens of conscious capitalism. And they're just a very unique company with amazing human beings. And they really gave me the room. And of course, they gave me the space to be creative, but I also was bringing ideas to the table and, just showing up and providing my energy and talents in a way that was outside of the realm of executive and personal assistant,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to say you also...
No, don't be sorry.
I think you're going to get to this, but you had one of the most interesting and relevant titles in today's zeitgeist that I've ever seen before, and I think that originated there, right? So, the stakeholder
engagement manager. Yeah. So, this is what, and we can talk about how this is my belief about why companies can be a platform for human development, and why I believe companies can be a force for good in the world, and why we should develop and nurture people's potential in the workplace, because Lulu did that for me. And then Randy Eisenman and Satori Capital did that for me. They recognized my contribution. Here I was, trying to go to school full time, and I was executive assistant, and I was helping them design what is called the Optimal Living Initiative, where we focus on mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health. So we built out this really cool employee engagement, optimal living program that focused on people's development. And I got to be a part of that.
What year was
that was in oh gosh, great question. I was actually just looking at goal setting from Satori. Yes. So that was probably 2013. I started with Satori in 2012. I helped them recruit some integral team members. They were only 3 years old when I joined the firm. And so I stared bringing on team members and then helping design their culture with Randy.
What an amazing experience, because, employee engagement was definitely a thing back then. But this notion of conscious capitalism, stakeholder capitalism,
right?
That's really only coming to the forefront now. And so y'all were putting initiatives together around that years ago, and what an amazing opportunity to be next to that so early.
Oh yeah, to be next to that, I love that. Yeah, it was. I call it divine timing. I call it good timing. I call it preparation with a constant commitment to growing and developing. I want to say preparation and luck, but I think we put ourselves in places for a reason. So. It was amazing. And Randy, and this is all interconnected in the conversation, but it's really important to understand the impact that people have on us, that they shape our lives. Workplaces shape our lives. The people we spend time with shape our lives. mostly the workplace because we spend most of our time there. And they really helped not only shape my life, but really allow me to tap into qualities and my own potentials and let me contribute in a way that I thought was meaningful. And they also thought was meaningful too. So stakeholder engagement manager, and loved every moment of it. Loved the company, still love the company, stay in touch with many of the team members. And then one of my best friends, who I brought from Lululemon with me to go to Satori Capital. And I was like, you can still wear your Lululemon. Like, I know you're a CPA and I know you left that world to go, into Lululemon, but you can actually wear Lululemon in the workplace, which isn't what she wears anymore. Let me just be clear. She's now the vice president of stakeholder experience.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, she's focusing on internal, external. Anyway, it's so cool.
And it's so important
Such a cool
that all
journey.
these things are drawn together. And, I think the pandemic has given us many opportunities. And one of them is definitely to see, carved in sharp relief, the relationship between the employee experience and the customer experience and shareholder experience. And how they all have to be in balance to some degree. But you have this amazing...
Didn't you use the word ecology?
Yeah, I use an ecosystem.
Did we talk about... Yeah, ecosystem.
Because I think historically we thought of it as a value chain, and that it's very sequential, and things flow out towards other people in sequential steps, or it's a triangle, and or whatever. And the reality is, I think it's much more organic than that, and it's more like a merry-go-round than it is a slide. People get on and get off in different places, and you don't really know when or where, and you can't really control that we've had all these concepts like buyer's journey and the employee journey and all that stuff, as if it's this sequential thing, and you can't really control that. But what you can control is the quality of every moment that you try to create for people.
Yes.
And then see what happens. But I think a lot of people are figuring that out, and I think just very viscerally. If you treat your employees poorly, or if their mental health suffers so significantly because, I don't know, like a once in a century pandemic combined with a bunch of other stuff, your company's probably not going to do too well. The shareholders aren't going to do too well. The customers aren't going to be super satisfied. So,
well, but you're bringing up the best point, which is it's all interconnected.
Yep.
Like, it's all interconnected, and it all has it has a ripple effect. And speaking of, the future that is emerging, yes, if you don't take care of, we have seen what happens when you don't take care of people and your community and your planet and all of these stakeholders in our ecosystem. The future is, what are we doing to actually cultivate the capacity and the emotional wellness and the resilience and the joy and love and freedom and liberation. So when we do experience another, breakdowns, like, we can all rise together from it, and, we can help each other. That's the ripple effect.
Yeah, because that didn't happen, right? Like in the pandemic, I don't think that happened. And it's really interesting.
No.
It's like, I always thought, I was a big fan of The Walking Dead. And when I was watching The Walking Dead, I loved it, but I always thought this isn't realistic, because if we really faced a threat, we would all come together as people. We wouldn't break into these tribes and, believe different things and fight each other and, enter this like scarcity mindset or whatever. But that's exactly what happened with the pandemic. It became a very tribal response. And it's just like, I always think like, the answer to everything right now is like, it's the pandemic, dummy. It's like, so whenever people are fighting, or like, why are we having all this craziness? Like, just fix the pandemic, and people will start coming together again. But like, we can do better.
Yeah, well, fix is a great term. And cultivate, and I honestly had I have been told or advised to not use love. Like, don't, is the world ready for that? Will they understand? Like, how do you take a loving approach? How do you liberate and empower the human spirit? And I just thought, it's what we need. I'm not going to shy away from saying we take a loving approach. Does that mean that, I don't rise to a challenge, that I can't take command of a room, that I can't hold accountable myself and others, that I don't understand business and strategic initiatives? No. What it means is that I'm a heart-centered leader who can come to the table and say, we've got a lot of really big freaking challenges, and how do we solve it with with more of a heart center, with more of a loving approach.
No, I totally agree. And I think it's ironic because the thing I was going to say is like, well, who cares if, some people don't believe, what you believe or, but that's kind of, it's ironic when it comes to the notion of love, because eventually you want, love to encompass everyone. But I think, the people who like, there's just been such a range of responses during the pandemic. And I think the people who, just like were honest and told people when they were having a hard time and, had empathy for their, experiences and everything. I think they just fared a lot better emotionally. And everything else, because it let the love in. A lot of people needed to let the love in, not just give the love, but let it in.
Yes. And, oh my God, I love that.
Well, leadership's that last frontier, right? Like everybody who's a leader, they enter it thinking, well, people expect certain things of me, and they expect that I'm going to be in control, know what to do.
I'm going to know it. I'm going to have all the answers. I'm going to be in control. I'm
somehow going to be immune from, no pun intended, all of the negative effects of COVID. I'm not going to struggle with the same things at home, get my grocery deliveries, childcare, all that stuff. And I think that a lot of leaders who tried to hide their own struggles just didn't really make it, in terms of, that's why there's a lot of people leaving jobs and stuff. They just got a life's too short.
Absolutely. Yes. And it doesn't have it doesn't have to be this way. There's another way. And, I'm not going to sum it up and just say, all we need is love. I mean, there's that, but it kind of is sometimes that simple. Like there is, yes, we have to understand all the mechanics of how to get there and systems and different theories and possibilities and create and strategic initiatives. Like I understand there's this system of how we get there. But to your point, it's like we're all really, there's a lot of suffering, and there can be less of it, or we can bind together to rise up together in our own individual and collective ways. And those leaders who, it is incredibly hard to watch what's happening on so many levels, and it's also revealing what we were lacking in the first place, because we wouldn't crack and fall apart this way if we had things, and if we didn't operate the way we were operating, with more of a scarcity mindset, all of the isms that exist, like all of the lack of compassion and the lack of connectedness, the lack of understanding of our impact on each other and the world around us. Like, that's what we have to do now. And we would still hurt from the blow, but we wouldn't crumble. Like we could be resilient.
I agree. And, as you're saying it, that's why I think it's so important that you use the word love, because, a lot of our problems are caused by the language that we use. And a lot of language in the workplace is very robotic. It's very, meant to make emotion secondary to pragmatism. And we use a lot of, like abbreviations and jargon and stuff like that. And I think a lot of that is wired to take the human, part of it out. And so I'll say that I love the fact that, you've got love all over your website, in your message, but also in your heart as you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Like you have this amazing background. You've got this background in, retail. I'd love to talk about Lululemon, but that could probably be a 3-hour conversation, because I'd love to hear about your experience there. And then you go through financial services, and then you start your own business. And now you have arrived at Tulla. And, I do want to talk about Tulla, but a lot of people would look at that like they just went and looked at your profile on LinkedIn or whatever. They'd see those experiences and they'd say, what do these things have in common? And as you talk about it, they have so much in common because there was a real strong realization at Lululemon and at Satori Capital. Did I say that right? Satori Capital? At Satori Capital. Yes. And in your own practice after that there was an interconnected relationship
between, people who are working for the company and the customers who are part of that community and the shareholders, and a sense of fairness and, impact on social good. And so it has now, at this point in your life, led you to Tulla. Tulla takes a very unique approach. So what does Tulla do? Let's start there.
Yeah. So we offer 3 different sets of services. Advising, which is macro level advising, and I'd say more on anything related to HR, people development, performance, anything related to human development, advising at a macro scale. But I have a social work background, and so I take there's a lens that I have around the advising, the macro level advising on workplace culture and the employee experience through the lens of a social worker. Then we have coaching, integral coaching, and the coaching is team coaching or individual coaching, and mostly it depends on what the person needs, but it's very transformational coaching where you focus on mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being. Now, not all companies are interested in hiring coaches that take that multidimensional approach, but that is my approach to always ensure that I'm taking into account the whole person.
Well,
so more integral coaching.
I'm sorry, just from increasingly though, people are more accepting of these multiple holistic dimensions of well-being, and just a very simple example is the proliferation of meditation apps as solutions that are provided by employers to people in the workplace to help with that spiritual component of well-being. And it's all on a spectrum, right? Like how far does it tilt, between pragmatism and spirituality. But it seems like that, scale is tilting a little bit more towards, that holistic understanding of you have to be well to do well, right? And so advisory, coaching, and
advising, coaching, and training.
And so that's what you do. How do you do it? How does it actually work?
So all models, advising, coaching, or training, is all informed through what I call the emergent method. It's our process of the 3-phase process: inquire, design, integrate. So we take a very human-centered approach, and our lens is, okay, let's take a scan of the entire environment, and through the lens of a logic model, understanding what are the inputs and the outputs, how do we put a plan together to create the conditions inside of the workplace that are aligned with the strategic initiatives of the company and helping team members, employees develop personally and professionally. So the first phase through inquiry is getting to know the environment through observation. It's through coaching, through one-on-one, through feedback, through stakeholder interviews. So it's this full inquiry of what's happening in the environment right now that's informing what's showing up in the organization, both very tangibly, like their outputs, their customer service scores, their financial output, anything that you can tangibly see. And then what's happening on the inside? What's the culture like? How are people feeling? What are the engagement scores that you can measure? And just how are people doing in life in general? So we take this inquiry approach. Once there's enough information in place that can really inform a strategy, then we design an overall strategy to support the needs of the organization. And oftentimes, Bret, I don't know if you've experienced this, but people go into the conversation when I'm being hired. It's like, we have this problem. And then you go in and you do the work and you really get to the root. And it's sometimes totally different. Like, this thing that they want help with is a symptom of the root issue. Oh
yeah, I run into that all the time, and I actually start further out, right? So a lot of times people are asking us to help with their brand, right? And they're not even thinking about their people or anything about the environment or anything like that. And we'll go in and, we'll talk to folks, in probably a similar discovery process, but more focused on customer experience, brand, stuff like that. And every now and then what we find is that the brand problem is not a brand problem at all. It's an environment or culture problem that, is leading to the inability of a company to live any sort of brand that people want to connect with. But, try going to, a company after they've hired you to like create a logo and say, hey, the way this brand is really going to fly is if we fix your employee experience problem. So at least you're a little bit closer, you start in a little bit closer.
Yeah. That's where that's usually why I'm called in right from the beginning, but that's amazing. Like, wow, that really is pretty amazing that's through your exploration and your inquiry process that you can arrive to that place. And that's a hard conversation to have with these leaders, but I know you all do it.
But, back to what you were talking about, somebody hires you for one thing, right? This thing that they think is the problem. So what most often is the problem that they think they're hiring you for, the opportunity that they're trying to unlock or whatever?
Yeah. Okay, great question. And you should totally coach me or school me on this. But I have a hard time saying, here's the problem we solve. I do not like talking about problems. But people have, it's like, the customer has to know what you're solving for them. And I'm like, okay, I get it. But my brain thinks, what is the possibility they want to create? And you said that. So sometimes people actually don't know what they need. They just know they need a change in the environment. So it could be, obviously they can see scores, employee engagement scores. So that's the first indicator from a human resource perspective or an executive perspective or anybody, like, okay, we need to work through this. And then, of course, any company that wants their team members to be exposed to ongoing personal and professional development, so there's coaching services or training services, those are usually the first identifiable needs, employee engagement scores or ongoing personal and professional development. And to your point, like more companies want their team members to experience coaching. But what I have been hired to do is, how do you unlock potential and how does it have an effect on the company? And so it's really more integral coaching and advising services that emerges, and the need that they have is revealed as a possibility. It's what can be possible for my organization, what can be possible for my team members, and how can we create a world that has, or how can we create a company that has a significant impact on our people and all of the stakeholders in the system. So the possibility is usually generated around the idea of I want to create good in the world, and I want to create a company that can offer that to our team members and our stakeholders.
Are they already there, or do you get them there? So do you ever get a call that's like, my engagement scores suck? We need to work on this because it's having an impact on turnover. And then, 2 or 3 months into it, you're like, hey, it'd really make a difference if like people were actually able to rally around a vision and purpose that's authentic in creating good in the marketplace. And you should just focus on that instead of like, the businessy side of the business so much. What does that look like?
So they're not there ever, usually in the beginning. And that's kind of the point of when you meet with a client and they're sharing their needs. Once you get into the work and you're observing and you're getting to know the people, and usually there's a root issue, and that's just the symptom that they've identified. So because I'm getting my clinical hours starting next month, but even before I decided to move into clinical work, my approach is to create a trusting alliance with people, so they know that when I come to them and I have feedback or I have these thematic observations, because I'm talking to people, I'm watching the environment, I'm seeing outputs. When I come to a leader or an executive team or people, an HR team or whoever's helping make decisions, I can say, look, this is what I'm hearing, and here's both the quantitative data, if we do pre and post survey, or it's qualitative data, and here's what I'm hearing at a thematic level from your team. And then ideally, and I believe this is a gift of mine and that I would like to, honor, is people really trust that I have their best interest in mind. And so when I come to them and I'm sharing details about, hey, you wanted this, but we really need to focus on rallying around a vision, and here's some other work that we need to do, they usually are like, yes, aligned. Okay, let's move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like as people who provide consulting and coaching and stuff like that, we're often in a position of moral hazard which is sometimes people want to use us as the blunt instrument to prosecute their agenda internally. And, we have these superpowers, right? Like a lot of people like us have this empathetic superpower where we can listen to and understand where someone's coming from and respond to it in a way that is helpful for that individual or helpful towards the goals of an organization or whatever. But, the dark side of that superpower, and a lot of people use the dark side, is that you can also use it to convince people to fall in line and do certain things that are good for one, like stakeholder, right? And it's very, it's just very interesting because a lot of times the things that need to be done in order to take advantage of the opportunity that you want to take advantage of, it takes a lot of work and it takes a collaborative relationship for those things to even wind up on the table at some point.
Absolutely.
So, let me build this, back together so that we all understand.
Okay.
So someone calls you because they want to create a better employee experience. They want to create a better environment. They want to, achieve some, objective.
Self-realization. They want to help actualize. No, I'm kidding. Self-actualization.
Climb all the way to the top of Maslow's hierarchy. And you come in and you do a lot of observation. Your team does a lot of observation. The observations in the form of, primary research, quantitative and qualitative surveys, interviewing people, gathering insights. You identify themes in the environment that run counter to the goals or opportunities that the business wants to unlock. And then you recommend a solution. What types of solutions are you recommending, and how does that end up manifesting in the work that comes after to, unlock these opportunities?
Yeah, great question. So one thing that I want to say about the inquiry phase is it never stops. So it's not like it's not this linear process. It's not a 1, 2, 3. It's they kind of, I traverse in all of these, these phases. But the first phase is when you're gaining as much insight as possible to be informed. At a certain point in a timeline, you have to start designing the solution or talking about the solution. So usually the solutions can vary. They can vary, but it would fall in line with the services that I offer outside of advising, which would be let's focus on coaching. So maybe you have individual coaching or team coaching, or it's offering training to team members inside the organization that might really benefit from, I want to say scaling their idea or championing the change inside the workplace. The other solutions can involve like evaluating their core values. Whether they have them or they don't have them. Maybe it's a core value journey. It might be reframing their vision statement or their long-term strategy. I would say that if I used examples of what we have done for clients who wanted to create a great workplace culture and employee experience, and this was at Hotel Drover in the Fort Worth Stockyards, and they were a new entity.
Yeah. It's so
Isn't
great.
it
It's so
amazing?
great for Fort Worth, but for people who have not been there, a lot of people are coming to Fort Worth now, but this is more than a hotel. This is has become rapidly like a cultural icon in the Stockyards in no time at all. And it just kind of, to me, it's a harbinger of like the future of Fort Worth. So it's an exciting place. So go on.
Yeah. Yes. Very exciting place. Cool development or redevelopment. So we identified integral coaching for their leadership team or their executive team of the new hotel. And that was 6 people. They're the vice president of the hotel, vice president, general manager, and then their executive team. So we provided integral coaching to all of their executive team as they were being onboarded as part of the process of kind of integrating them. But prior to even doing that, we actually visited the client's corporate office in Las Vegas. So we got a sense of who they are, what they wanted to create in Fort Worth, how they could become an extension of how can they build this great culture. But this is a 25-year-old company that is in Las Vegas. So we started there. Then we started integral coaching for their executive team members. And then we took them through a core values journey, which was a several month process around how do you want when the question was, when your team members leave work for the day, how do you want them to feel? What are they feeling? And then when your client leaves, or your customer, your stakeholder, your guest leaves, how do you want them to feel? How do you want them to feel while they're on site? So we took them through the core values journey and helped them understand, and not just them, this is how I feel about core values in general, how they actually, when you embody them, how they live out in the employee experience and how they impact the customer experience or the guest experience.
I love so much about that. It reminds me of a Maya Angelou quote, which I'm going to get totally wrong, but it was something like, people won't remember what you say and they won't remember what you do, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And then I love that you connected it all the way out to the customer experience and, really showing how, the feelings are really should be around those values or what you're trying, the vision that you're trying to achieve. And everyone should be rowing in the same direction around what that, vision is.
Absolutely. And that's how you actually attract the right people. Like, who are the right people to work here? How will they make others feel? And how will our values actually improve people's lives? Are we focused on values inside and outside of the workplace that really help improve somebody's life for the long term? Not just I come in and I'm there from, whatever. Of course, a lot of us are remote now. Well, but this is hospitality.
To your point, no one has a job. I mean, this is going to sound terrible when I say it, but no one has a job anymore. Like, if all you had was a job, you got out of that thing, because like so many people are just like moving on from this notion of just showing up and working someplace to, is this, does this, as our vice president of employee experience says, does this fill my cup? And if it,
I love that.
And if it doesn't, I mean, it's like life is too short. So people are, getting in vans and, living on the road.
I know.
And doing other things.
Imagine what we could have avoided. So if we look at where we are today and people leaving at just this rapid pace, it's kind of mind-boggling. This great resignation also is the great awakening of like, oh no, this is not how I want to spend my time. And this is why, also part of what we originally talked about, Bret, is we spend, from my perspective, I focus more on adult development in the workplace, but two very important developmental phases of our life are spent in the workplace. And this isn't a 10-year span. This is 18 to 65 years old. There's 18 to 40 years old, which is, anyway, I won't go into detail, but this is Erik Erikson's psychosocial model of development. We are shaping people's lives and value systems and purpose and meaning and our vision. That's part of how we shape
We'll
people.
drop that in the description. People need to read that because it is profound.
Yeah.
And I see it all the time.
You know what?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, I just see it. It's like people, based on the experiences they have with their employers and the motivations of those employers and the way they treat them, they can end up at 40 being very paranoid and having a very almost like anti-establishment view of these profiteering business owners who have always taken advantage of me, or they can end up having very rich relationships and like an ecosystem that works, where they were proud of the work that they did, and they were proud of the the companies that they worked with and the customers that they served. But I'd never thought of it in that context. I never thought of it as like ongoing development in that context.
Yes. Yeah. Well, most people, we stop talking about development once people start in the workplace, which is nuts because we stop thinking about, anyway, there's a problem on why not a problem. There's a possibility for companies to adopt an understanding of we really are stewards of human development and love. And by the way, you said, when somebody is moving into their 40s, they can have their perspective on the world or their outlook on the world could be, this is a terrible place to be, or it can be, I love, I have very meaningful relationships. I have love and intimacy in my life. I have this deep soul fulfilling, or I have this meaningful life. So during stage 6 in Erik Erikson's psychosocial model of development, the stage 6 is called intimacy versus isolation. And the main virtue in this developmental stage that we as humans are trying to experience, the desired virtue out of this developmental phase, is love. And if we are successful in that phase of development and we move into our 7th stage, which is I'm sorry, yeah, our seventh stage, which is generivity versus stagnation. So here you are, you're 18 to 40 years old, spending your life in the workplace, you're being shaped, you're being informed, your perspective on life is still being developed, you're learning intimate relationships, not just like sexual relationship, you're learning intimacy and trust, and how do I dialogue with someone, how do I be in relationship with someone, with my coworkers. Then if you're successful, the desired virtue you experience is love. And then you move into 40 to 65, generivity versus stagnation. What happens when you are generating is you are contributing to the world around you. You're raising your family. You are mentoring, you're coaching, you're giving back all of these gifts that you have cultivated, and you're sharing them and contributing them in a major phase of your life of 40 to 65 years old.
Yeah.
That's big work.
It's big work, and it's a tremendous responsibility on both sides.
Yes.
It's not just, we've all talked to, different business owners and different executives who have different views of, people as a resource, people as capital, or, people as people. And you can just really see a difference over the long run in terms of sustainability. When it comes to just, how are the people doing that you like? I've run the same company now for over 20 years. A lot of the people that I've worked with for 15 years, 10 years. And if I look back on people who have come through the Starr conspiracy and people who are still there, generally speaking, I see a very productive, happy, engaged, supportive, loving community. I've seen other, work environments where people come in, they get beat up, and, their career kind of goes on a spiral from that point forward because they lost the trust, they lost the love, they lost the engagement. Right. And then they isolate. And it only takes one, and during a pandemic, isolation in quarantine or whatever can be like really tough to climb out of. And I really believe this notion that it only takes one really bad employee experience, one really bad job, one really bad manager, whatever, to kind of screw you up for a long time. I mean, it's a big deal.
It's like you get out of your childhood, and hopefully you haven't been had a hard upbringing, which I do come from. I've had my mother's bipolar, my sister's bipolar, or they have bipolar disorder. They are not that. They have the disorder. Like, I grew up in a household that did not shoot me out into the world and say, like, you've got this. So then I'm like, okay, here we go. Then I go into the workplace. My life was shaped by some of the most amazing human beings. And I owe where I am today to partially to this system, this ecosystem of people that were like, we're going to figure out how to lift you up. You're going to do your work. You're going to work hard. You're going to hit your goals. You're going to, you're going to do all the things that you're supposed to do in your job. And we're also going to make sure that we invest in you, which is like, that's how relationships work. These reciprocal, we give and we share and we give and take, and sometimes we have confrontation, but how we move through that will also change the trajectory of our relationship with them. Anyway, it's just
totally
huge responsibility.
It is. I'd love to have a deeper conversation about this is another area where I would just, I would love to double click and stick on it for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
But, it's funny because I had a terrible childhood. And a lot,
I'm right there with you.
A lot of folks who I know who are the most, who have the most intent and are the most conscientious about, trying to do good and be good for others are ones who learned that later in life because they were supported in a way that they weren't supported by their families. And so, the catch-22 is that I think that adversity can be such a powerful launch pad for so many wonderful people, but you don't want to have to create adversity in order for people to, like my kids have not experienced adversity, well, except for this fucking pandemic. Besides the pandemic, they've experienced no adversity.
But you know what? They're resilient because of it. They're resilient now.
Well, now I should feel better because I used to wonder, should I create some false adversity so that they turn out okay? But now the pandemic's happened, so.
We've funny.
Got it. So
that's a good.
we got to talk about MDMA.
Yeah.
So before I get on to the topic of MDMA, is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have, or that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to?
Well, thank you for the follow-up. That was just the final piece of the process that we use at Tulla, is integration. Okay. And integration is important, and it'll actually lead into the conversation around psychedelics too. But integration in life, the lessons that we learn, how are we, the strategy that's in place, how are we integrating in the workplace? These values, how are we integrating it? Personal development, how are we integrating it in life so it changes our way of being? Anyway, the integration phase is important. So most of that
work has to be done at the individual and ground level and team level, right? It's like, is that where the integration occurs? I mean...
Yeah. It's the day in and day out work, whether it's through the coaching and you have weekly practices or you have homework, which can be a variety of practices in different domains. It could be, having a team meeting where you start talk about your core values. So integration comes in many different ways, through a meeting, through the integration of these practices that maybe you're given during the coaching service, but it's ongoing.
So. Tell me, now we will get to MDMA. People are going to be really upset by this headline because it's going to say MDMA on it. But we will get there.
Yes.
But solve this riddle for me. How much different really is coaching from therapy? Go.
It is the technique and probably the licensing. I mean, so it's techniques that you use. There's cognitive behavioral coaching, and then there's cognitive behavioral therapy. So the difference is, for clinicians have thousands of hours of clinical work, direct practice in can be in a very focused area of a therapeutic modality. Coaches also could have thousands of hours of training, but there's clinical training and then there's coaching. They overlap. I guess I should say that there's a lot of overlap, but clinicians are held to different standards. They're held to different ethical guidelines. They have different practices. They go deeper into more of probably the science, or the. Anyway, is that a good answer?
It was kind of a trap, because I want to take your answer, which I think is I totally agree with everything you said, and put it in perspective with what's happening right now. So pandemic. Big focus on well-being. Companies like BetterUp have raised hundreds of millions of dollars to offer these virtual coaching solutions to companies. Yeah. And so there's so many of them out there, and sometimes they have coaches, sometimes they have therapists, sometimes they have credentialed coaches, and sometimes they don't. And these platforms have all the same, challenges that everyone else has around maintaining a workforce of people who can be on the other side of the computer when somebody dials in for a virtual coaching or therapy session or whatever. Yeah. And so, there's different standards that people are held to through credentialing and everything. Right. But that's on a spectrum for both of those. So, I could call myself a coach. Sure. Right? Like I've got a lot of experience, and I can coach somebody, and I've got a point of view.
There's all sorts of,
And then there's certified coaches.
Yes.
And then there's, people who have are certified, but also have only done coaching in a very specific context for a very long time. And so they've got a lot of the hours. And then you've got, different levels of certification in therapy, in different styles, and et cetera. How much potential is there right now in the moment of probably greatest need, where we're trying to build the most access to coaching and therapy? How much potential is there that there's a lot of people who might not ought to be doing that work? And how, and are we, you know what I mean? Like, this is the biggest wave. I think people have thought about this. This is the biggest wave of coaches and therapists that we have ever put in front of employees in history.
And this is just the start.
And I see the other side of it. I see a lot of these companies struggling to keep their stable of, freelance coaches, because, one coach might be on 3 different platforms, and some of the therapists who use this model might be on, Talkspace and 2 others. And it's almost kind of like Uber in some ways. They want to stay booked. So they're going to go out and, be on multiple platforms. So how critical is the credibility of that person? And how much, does any of this make sense? How much risk is there here? Or is it just helpful to be able to talk to somebody?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, always helpful just to be able to talk to somebody. I'll just say that. But it depends on the need of the person. So if somebody is experiencing major depression, I would not put them on a call with a coach who I might say coaching and therapy would be helpful, because I know a therapist that is trained in these healing modalities or these therapeutic modalities that completely understand the science and the brain science and the behind depression, and they are trained deeply in it. So if the need is, I think people have to be clear about the need. And as coaches and clinicians, I'm not a clinician yet, but we have an obligation to the client to determine if this is someone we can support. And if it is out of our realm of training and understanding, we don't do the work. We refer. So I think, I think first, what's really important is right now, having somebody talk to is so helpful. Even if it's, hey, Bret, I'm here to support you. I'm going to offer you a referral. Or you want coaching in this. And, I provide integral coaching, which is pretty multidimensional. But if you're looking for this specific set of skills, I know a great coach. Or does that make sense?
Does.
So refer.
It really does.
Okay. And I think people should train. This is why I'm developing more the train the trainer model. Is we need really phenomenal training, and we need phenomenal understanding, and why I want to blend clinical work with business, because we have to understand how to take care of our people and the business, but we have to understand the kind of the science behind it and the research informed evidence-based approach to taking care of people.
The reason I ask is because, you're going to be doing some pretty intense stuff. You already do some pretty intense stuff. And, a lot of times when I'm working with like HR practitioners who are thinking about like getting a coaching software solution, they care more, they do more due diligence on the software platform than they do how the coaches are recruited to be on the platform. To me, I'm just, I think it's an open question around... Well, how much does it matter in certain contexts? So you identified a very specific, gradient, which I think makes a lot of sense. If someone has like a clinical, need, then, obviously their need is greater and they should be matched with someone who has the right credentials. But a lot of times it is okay just to, you just need somebody to talk to. And, that's, someone outside of, so you feel safe, someone outside of your team or your company. But I'm really torn about it because I have seen, people take really bad advice and, work it into their lives.
You can get a certificate to be a coach in like 2 hours.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Well, I might be exaggerating a little, but not all coaching programs are created equally. To your point, like why you're really torn is nothing, especially the work this deep work, it's not all created equally. So the due diligence, and I think, hopefully you're advising these HR practitioners who are making this software selection to say, get to know the team. What are their hiring practices? How do they train and develop?
Well, what I do actually is tell them to go through the process of applying to be a coach on the platform. And I have filmed every single application process from major players. And you get a really good sense of how credible, their the barrier to entry is. And there's some really great ones out there, and there's some other ones that are just like, put your email in, and we'll get in touch with you.
Yeah, but Bret, there's a lot, to your point, there's such a massive need, and if the intention is good, it's like people are trying to figure out how to be more helpful and help with suffering, and so my perspective is, of course, I want to say optimistic, but there's such a need, and we need to be very careful as well. We need to be discerning discerning in our
Well,
approach.
I just think I a long time ago became a Berkman certified consultant. So that's one of the assessments, that is very similar to like the Myers-Briggs or whatever. And they were a client of ours like way, way back in the day. And it's like a 2-hour assessment, and, they produce, they've probably had millions of people take it. And so it's all benchmarked, and, you get these coaching reports and all that stuff. But to be fair, I got my certification, over the course of, I think a week, training in person there, and then like a couple of follow-up sessions. And there's a lot of coaching assistance in the reports that are provided and everything. But if I looked back on my 30-something-year-old self giving advice to people based on their results to this assessment, it's like, I hope they didn't take it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, or like we should just learn critical thinking skills and, these skills that unfortunately aren't taught in school, like logic and philosophy and critical thinking. So you might be given advice and I might be like, I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, isn't it? Yeah.
That doesn't sound smart.
Well, and you bring up another point, which is, challenging people who give you advice as a way to gain deeper understanding, I think is really, really critical. But that's really hard to do if the person who's giving you the advice is your boss or your manager. And so there's so many complex layering of, just status, relationship, kind of power dynamic things that go into all of this.
Yes.